Most high-performing people don't realize that they're burning out until it's too late. The cost? Health that gets compromised for starters, and relationships that get disrupted. And those brilliant ideas that could solve some of our most wicked problems, get shelved. If you've ever tried to rest and felt worse, or tried to push and collapsed harder, sit down, my friend. We need to talk. This is Jagged Brilliance, the show for ambitious founders, leaders, and twice exceptional minds who don't fit in neat boxes. Here, we break down what actually holds high potential people back. Things like invisible burnout, mislabeled sensitivity, and systems built for average. Here, you learn how to turn your uneven edges into strategic advantage and build sustainable impact without burning yourself out. Let's dive in. If you're listening to this, chances are that you are not new to pressure, that you know how to carry responsibility, and you're accustomed to working hard. You also likely know when to push when it matters. These strengths and familiar patterns are also the exact reason why burnout often goes unnoticed in people like you, because it doesn't look like collapse at first. Instead, others see and name discipline, commitment, and resilience, until one day, the strategies that always worked stop working. Rest, if you can pull it off at all, makes you actually feel worse, and pushing harder makes you crash harder. And nothing seems to bring your brain back online. That's usually the point that people say, something is wrong with me. But very often what is actually wrong is the label being applied to the state that you're in the first place. If we haven't met yet, I'm Marianne Power. I'm a behavioral scientist and neuro-inclusive systems strategist, and I work with founders, leaders, and teams who operate at the edge of complexity and responsibility. And almost without exception, they arrive with that same very question into our work. What is wrong with me? On the surface, the patterns often look similar: fatigue, friction, and loss of traction. But underneath, there are a couple of differences that show that the causes aren't always the same. This distinction is missed again and again, and when it's missed, the one we're talking to today, people lose years trying to solve and prevent the wrong thing. Because there are two very different nervous system states that get collapsed into the same word: burnout. But they're not the same. Autistic burnout and ADHD crash can look similar from the outside, but they come from very different mechanisms. And in my experience, they require very different responses. When we misidentify them, we often prescribe the exact thing that makes recovery or prevention slower. Today, we're going to get to know the nuance so that you can spot the patterns and seek out the right solutions for yourself. Let's start with the ADHD crash. An ADHD nervous system runs on interest and activation. When interest is high, energy is available, and when it drops, access to energy drops with it. We unpacked this interest-driven system more in detail in episode 2, so I've linked that in the show notes if you want to go back to go deeper. But an ADHD crash usually follows long stretches of sustained urgency, high stakes, and constant demand, which brings with it prolonged adrenaline. And often it's in the work that matters, but doesn't necessarily engage the person delivering it. In simple terms, the system runs hot for too long. When the crash comes, it often looks like this: sudden exhaustion, emotional flatness, a loss of motivation, and difficulty initiating even the simplest of tasks, and even the ones that you enjoy. Here's the important distinction. In an ADHD crash, rest often helps. And before you break away, I'm not talking about a passive collapse, but time-driven work with necessity or urgency. Rest from that for the person delivering it. Sleep, reduced cognitive load, low demand days, as I like to call them, and a return to those long-term goals through the pathway of interest and not pressure. So with the right conditions, the system can come back online relatively quickly. That's why for some founders and high performers, particularly in sports, we can actually design scaffolding into and out of these necessary intense sprint periods, rather than treating every crash as a failure. Burnout looks different, especially if you're autistic. It's less about running hot, although that could be part of the pathway. It's more about running misaligned, Autistic burnout has been described in the research as more of a cumulative state. It builds over time through chronic masking, sustained sensory overload, and repeated social and environmental mismatch. Researchers who study the experience of burnout in our autistic adults describe this as a state where internal resources are exhausted beyond measure. And those with lived experience talk about how the demands of the environment consistently exceeded their efforts to keep up and for their nervous system to adapt. In practical terms, this means that we're not talking about simple tiredness, but a nervous system that's not only overstimulated, but probably overwhelmed and deeply depleted. And this is why that passive rest alone, again, often doesn't always work. Before I go any further, a quick but important note. What I'm describing in today's episode here isn't medical diagnosis, and it's definitely not a substitute for individual clinical care. Nor is it a permission slip for the HR department to take a fix into your performance management meeting. More on that process in a later episode. Nervous systems vary widely, and personal history, health, and context always matters. So if you are navigating burnout or you feel like you're tipping into it and things feel unmanageable, this is where a trusted health professional should be a part of your picture. Today, what I'm offering here is an educational lens. It's a way of understanding patterns that show up often, not always. For someone in autistic burnout, time off can actually increase distress. When structure and predictable routine fall away, that anxiety often rises. Paradoxically, what the system needs is not disappearance, but the kind of rest where the mask can come off safely. And that's often not at work. Unmasking without adequate support can feel really destabilizing, not relieving. Now, as I always say, if you've met one autistic person or one person of any neurotype for that matter, background or identity, then you've met exactly that one person. So these things don't generalize. Everyone is different. Learning how these patterns show up for you is the work. But what I can say applies more broadly is this. In burnout states, the nervous system rarely needs less input. It needs different kinds of input and under different conditions. This distinction is well documented in autism research, particularly in studies led by Raymaker and colleagues that I'll link below, and later work examining masking, sensory load, and expectation capacity mismatch in autistic adults and our modern day workforce. Today, I want to focus on where people get stuck and where the real damage happens. Because often it's completely avoidable. People in autistic burnout are often told to push through, or my favorite, take a holiday, or be more resilient. Whereas people in ADHD crash are often told to radically restructure their life, when what they actually need is recovery from sustained urgency. Both groups are often given generic advice from people who don't even realize that they're trying to solve for the wrong neurobiological problem. And that is why so many high potential people, in my opinion, stay stuck. This cost is actually seen and captured at scale in the research. In 2025, research by Never Not Creative found that 70% of professionals in the creative sector reported experiencing burnout in the previous 12 months. What that report revealed was multiple points of loss, people suffering in silence, ideas gathering dust, innovation being slowed, and solutions shelved. And many of those people are not burnt out in the same way. If you're listening and relating to any of this and wondering what actually helps, let me give you my biggest tip. The first step is not fixing. It's accurate identification of the actual problem. And importantly, its underlying source. You can't recover from a state that you've misunderstood or one that's been misnamed. So ask yourself, when I rest, do I feel safer or more dysregulated? When pressure is removed, does clarity return or does it disappear? Do I feel depleted from doing too much or from being too misaligned for too long? These questions and their nuance matters. The statistics of burnout in our neurodivergent community, and heck, the world at large right now, are unprecedentedly high rates. but they don't have to be your destiny. Recovery, and more importantly, prevention, starts with understanding and radically accepting your unique neurobiology, how your brain and nervous system interpret the cognitive, social, emotional, and environmental cues around you, and then designing conditions that work with that system and not against it. Listen, I know you're a highly ambitious human, and telling you to do less ain't going to cut the mustard. But what I am asking you to consider is how you might do things differently. If rest has made you feel worse, or if pushing has made you collapse harder, then rather than assuming that there is something inherently wrong with you, I want you to take a look at the conditions around you and the way that you've set your work-life flow up. Is it helping or hindering the nervous system that you've been given to navigate this world in? If it's the latter, it might be time to see where you can shake things up, move things around, and get out of your own way. There is a path here, and one that doesn't require you to completely abandon your ambition or flatten your edges. You can design a version of success that honors how you actually work at your own pace and on your own terms. So resources and research links are linked below if, again, you want to explore further. And I'm Marianne Power, and this is Jagged Brilliance. We'll see you next episode.